This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Allison Cook, Super Inframan, and Stephen St. George. If you would like to help support the show, become a patron. WhereDidTheRoadGo.com. It's only $3 a month. Lots of extra content all month long. And now, our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have as my guest Gemma Jade. How are you doing today?
I am doing beautifully. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to finally get together with and meet you.
Yes, we've been trying to set this up for a few months now.
We're here now.
So you have a bunch of stuff going on. You have a book called Missing the Fae Theory.
Yes.
You have a YouTube channel, and you're working on a couple other books.
Yes.
So I guess let's start with you and you have you consider yourself a psychic.
Yes, I do.
And you've had a lot of weird experiences, and these have come all the way back from when you were a kid, right?
Yeah, I'm a lifelong psychic and seer for sure.
And what's like the earliest stuff you remember?
I remember, I think it was probably my first memory. It was my 4th birthday, and I got a new bicycle. I got my first bicycle with the little trainy wheels and all that. And I remember that my grandfather was at the birthday party, but I knew even at that age that grandpa was, in heaven. That's what I was told, my maternal grandfather. And he was, happy for me and playing with me with my new toys, but I knew I was the only one who can see him. And that's kind of from that first vision, I guess you would call it, or that first experience, interaction, is when I learned, as I said to you a little earlier, that my Irish Catholic father was not okay with my psychicness, as I call it. I think it really scared him a lot, but I remember playing with grandpa a lot when I was younger, but he passed away 3 months after I was born. But I was told that my mother was his favorite child, and he did have 11, and I was his favorite grandchild for the time that he was here. So
nice. And from there, I mean, you said at some point you started to bury these things you were picking up.
Yeah, that happened later on in life, but up until my teenage years, where I finally had enough of it, it's not easy to be a kid growing up as it is. Kids are mean and kids are cruel, but when you're seeing spirit everywhere as well, and when you're playing with your best friend in the yard and her grandfather who passed away, 20 years earlier, is like begging you to give her a message. And, I see them as full blown people. They look solid. They're very much real, but you can't say that as a little kid or even as a high schooler. It's even hard to say as an adult, but I did deal with it for a very long time. But I've had, really bad things come into, or spirit, somebody might be, I grew up in an inner city. So somebody might've been hurt or hit by a car or even killed 5 houses away, and they would visit me with their death on them. Say they had been, run over by a car, they would visit me mangled as though they had just been run over instead of in their, so it was very scary. I remember spending almost all my time in my room with my books and just really not even wanting to leave the house. But of course, you get visits in the house too. It was a lot. I had a lot of very friendly, ghost friends though, or spirit friends. So it wasn't all bad.
And obviously, you said your dad was not particularly supportive of this. What about your mom?
My mom is mostly Cherokee, but there's some Iroquois in there. And she was okay with it. She kind of knew it was going on. She said, even as a baby, I would kind of stare off into, the corner and smile. But babies do that. So she wasn't really sure if it was something going on with me. There have been other people in my family who have been psychic, but, I was born in the early 80s. So before that, it was really unmentionable. So you didn't really talk about it. My mom was okay with me talking about it to her, but when my parents divorced when I was 7 or 8, I went to live with just my dad. So that got a little tough. And that's actually when we moved into an apartment where most of the bad experiences started with me.
Oh, what kind?
Well, the first one I had in that particular apartment, which is one that I would say is one of the worst ones I've ever had. I did do a video about it. I called it the Demon Claire, but I was pretty good when I was younger, more so now, but I would go like into the new apartment, into my room, and I would touch the wall and I would get to see all the people who lived there before me. In my mind's eye, I would close my eyes and I'd see it as if it were right in front of me. And I knew that other little girls had been in this room. It had been perpetually pink for like 50 years, And there was one of the little girls. She was wearing very old fashioned clothing. It turns out she was only from like the 1950s. What she was projecting to me. And I became friends with this little girl. I had no friends in the neighborhood, didn't have a lot of money. I was the weird girl anyway, because I was always staring off into space or talking to quote unquote myself. Really, I was speaking to spirit and telling it to leave me alone, because they have no boundaries. They just approach you out of, wherever you are, whatever you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
So I made friends with this little girl and I spent every day with her. My father cut mine and my sister's bunk beds because my sister was with my mom now. And instead of cutting off the top bunk or removing the top bunk, he removed the bottom bunk so that I had the top bunk at its height with all that room underneath it. So Claire and I would sit under there and tell ghost stories, which is funny enough. I knew she was a spirit, but she was my best friend for months and months. And I remember whenever I would walk out of this house, it was a dead end street and there was like these woods there and a big old abandoned factory. And I would always hear screaming. It sounded animalistic, but again, inner city, there aren't things like coyotes or things like that. I know now like what a coyote sounds like, and I kind of liken it to that. Mm-hmm. But so anyway, long story short, Claire gets me one day to go out and go for a walk with her down this dead end and into the woods. And I go full-blown trance, first time in my life. And she's showing me a vision. And it turns out that some kids in the 50s had summoned a demon to these woods. And it was just hanging around waiting for someone who would be able to acknowledge it. And that was me. And the demon was the little girl, Claire.
Now, when you say demon, how do you define demon?
Well, I saw in my head the ritual that was being performed. And it was an actual summoning of a lesser demon from hell. So what we would normally, a lot of us think of demon. I know a lot of people don't believe in hell and a lot of people. So it's speculative, but growing up Catholic and being Christian now, I understood it to be a minion of the devil. Very hideous, very lesser, kind of just having fun with me because it could. It was terrifying. And I remember after having this whole vision, I woke up in that field. My father had found me. I don't know how long I was passed out, and I never saw Claire again. It was kind of like it was just messing with me because it could, because nobody had come along since it had been summoned and acknowledged it.
Interesting. I mean, it seems very tricksterish almost.
It was like playful, or evilly playful, little kid type stuff. Yeah, it wasn't, I don't feel like it was out to like possess me or take my soul, but I do feel like, it would have hurt me had I continued to follow it around. I mean, there's nothing good that can come from hanging out with a demon. There had to have been something it wanted, but I think my father found me in time.
Okay. And then, so bad stuff continued to happen in that house?
It was that house, and I believe it was the next house I'd lived in as well with my mom, and that's when I kind of realized I was was bringing these things to me. But in that house specifically, there was a lot of dead. I know now, just from doing walkthroughs of people's houses and seeing what's up there, that there were a lot of, I don't want to say vortexes, but there were a lot of portals. Where there would be a constant line of dead people entering, exiting, going around, entering, exiting, and a lot of residual energy that it was attached to that specific house, but also to the neighborhood itself. when I looked as I got older, there was a lot of crime going on in the early 90s at that time, and had been since the 1950s. I really feel like if I had investigated further, which I still haven't done, there would be some, like a lot of maybe murders, devil worshiping, a lot of sacrificing, a lot of people using Ouija boards, just a lot, all in this one little like 3-block radius where there was so much activity going on of people being interested in the other side, spiritualists, in the early 50s even, that kind of brought all of this together like this big kind of atomic fireball of, I don't want to say evil, I don't like the word evil, but like lower vibrational energy and entities. And I was the only one in the neighborhood that can see them. So they came to me, a lot of dead showing up with their death on them, sitting at the dinner table eating, and someone with a bullet hole in their head just sits down and smiles with no teeth at me, while I'm trying to eat. And I think a lot of them fed off my fear, and a lot of them needed to be crossed over, and I learned how to do that at a very early age as well.
Interesting. I always wonder about the feeding off fear thing, that if they just feed off any energy that's available, but fear is the easiest one to draw out.
I think, that's probably a very correct statement. I know that fear, like you said, it would come on so easily, sure, they can feed off my happiness but lower vibrational energies and entities and people who may be afraid to cross over because of something they did in life, they're not the best people in life. And we tend to, and some people would disagree, but this is what I know, that we tend to take on a lot of our personality with us. So if we were funny in life, we're going to be a funny spirit when we're, coming back to see you. If we were horrible and mean in life, we're going to be that way at least a little bit when we come back to see you. There's lots of changes we go through on the other side, sure, as our soul incarnates and grows, but we do keep that essence of ourselves, of who we are at our core, once we go over there and even when we incarnate again.
Okay. And so did you have experiences that didn't involve like spirits? Like, did you see cryptids or UFOs or anything like that?
Yes. So I'll start with that same house, or actually it was an apartment we lived in a house, with my dad. And I did a video on this too. And this is still going on in my life. So I was visited one day, I was just sitting there playing, I guess, with my dolls. I don't remember if it happened during one of my seizures, which I used to have these random, my fever would get like 104 and then I would seize out. And then I want to come back to that later because I recently had repressed memories about what was actually going on during those seizures. But it might have been during one of those, it was the 80s. I guess you didn't have to bring your kid to the hospital, or the early 90s, because my dad would just put me in a tub of cold water. And then once I stopped seizing, he would lay me on the couch and take ice cold rags and put them on me,
Yeah.
And I remember specifically looking over to my right and a very tall shadow figure, a less tall shadow figure, like a 5 foot tall one. And then it's like 6 foot tall, 5 foot tall. And then something that looks kind of like a minion or a pet. It kind of looked like a little dog, but it was a shadow person. So I knew it wasn't a ghost, because ghosts don't appear to me that way. Spirits don't appear to me that way, right? Even demons and the devil himself, who I've met, do not appear that way. So it was a shadow person. It was totally new to me. And I got energy off them as male, female, and pet. But I wouldn't say that's what they were. That's just how my human mind was conceptualizing them. The man is the tallest one. The female is I understood that that's what they were. There was nothing that gave it away, because they were just outlines of shadow,
Right.
The quote unquote male. And when I use male and female and pet, understand that, because I don't want to have to keep saying quote unquote. The male one had a hat on, so it was kind of a hat man. And the male one did have the glowing red eyes, but they came out of the wall and just stared at me. And I was very scared. And eventually my dad picked me up and brought me into my room, and nothing really came of it, except that they came through the wall, out of the shadows. And they showed themselves to me, and I knew it was a purposeful thing. I have that inner knowing,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm playing with my dolls a few weeks, maybe a few months later, and out they come out of the wall again. And all of a sudden, I got very, very tired. And I thought to myself, who cares if it's still light out? You should put the dolls down and go to sleep. No, I didn't know then that they were putting this in my mind. I would wake up and my eyes would be kind of like, felt like they were like pinned open, and I would be so scared, and these things would be leaning over me, and I could almost see them sucking like my breath out of me. It was almost like something you see in a movie. It wasn't like green fog or anything crazy, but it's somehow I knew they were stealing my energy from me. I knew it. Even I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And I was trying to ask them telepathically what they were doing. So I never really understood it, but my whole life, I've had conversations with these 3 entities, and I start calling them the family. I would ask where they come from. They would say another time. I would ask, what do you want with me? They'd say, that's not for you to know. But I would have random, even sometimes almost friendly conversations with them. They would just say, I'm helping them. But the female, the one that I took for female, would sit with me and talk about my dolls. And once I got older, ask me, it was almost like a motherly type thing. I didn't realize until very recently that this is not normal shadow person behavior, right? They don't communicate with you like that. They don't show an interest in what you're doing today and how you're playing with your dolls, right?
Yeah.
But whenever they do come around, and I would say now it's maybe once every 6 months, but it used to be at least once a month, I would wake up in the middle of the night in a sort of sleep paralysis episode, but I would see them taking from me. Like I could see my energy going out. I don't know what it's all about, but what I'm starting to think is that these are some kind of otherworldly or extraterrestrial entity that my mind can only perceive as shadow.
Okay. All right. And you said this is still going on?
They still come. I don't speak to them or acknowledge them. I don't want them anywhere near my almost 4-year-old toddler because I don't know what they are. When you're little, you're innocent. If someone or for me, they were someone's because I saw spirit all the time and they were nice to me when they weren't draining me of my energy or causing me sleep paralysis. So I'm afraid that my son is going to, maybe they're here for him now because my son is starting to have past life memories and he's starting to have them. Normally you forget these things by the time you're 4 if you're going to. Like he remembers a time when I was his mother. He mentioned to me, he asked me for milk and I was like, yeah, I'm tired. I'll get up in a minute, dude. Like, hold on. And he's like, I had to wait so much extra time for you to get to your stuff together just so you could be my mommy. And now I got to wait for milk too, things like that. Yeah. Like things like that come out of this kid's mouth. And I'm like, wow, like he knows something. So I do still see them here and there, but I totally ignore them. They know that I'm purposefully ignoring them, but they haven't asked for anything. None of my sleep paralysis episodes have involved them, but I think it's extraterrestrial. And this goes back to the seizures I would have, or more like convulsions. I recently, I should preface this, my entire life I've been terrified of anything having to do with extraterrestrials, outer space. I mean, watching anything with even a fake, funny, mockery of alien abduction would scare the crap out of me. I would cry and shake. I've recently come across just one so far, repressed memory of when I was in these convulsions. I was actually in a room, not with my dad putting rags on me, but with these extraterrestrials that look kind of like what we know as the Greys, all putting their hands kind of on me, not fully touching me, but it was like they were doing the same thing these shadow people were doing to me, only the opposite. They were putting something into me. That's all I remember. It's only that one time. My father, I've asked him about it because it only happened one time in this particular house, where I said to him, do you remember the time on so-and-so street when I had that convulsion, that really bad one? I had told him there was like juice falling from the ceiling. I was hallucinating. And he's like, oh yeah. I'm like, what happened after you took me out of the bathtub? He said, I laid you on the couch and I put rags on you. He said, and then I picked you up and I carried you into your room and then I went to bed and I checked on you all night. So he has the same memory I do, only I know now that's not what happened. My father was kind of like frozen in time for a few minutes while they did whatever it was they were doing. And that's another reason I feel like these shadow people are somehow connected to extraterrestrials. And recently I've become obsessed with extraterrestrials, outer space. I have the ET5 app. I've got the protocols. I've ordered equipment. I've been outside every single night calling for them to come and use me as a channel. And throughout the day for the past 3 weeks, I get these tiny little bits like deja vu of memories of, so-called dreams that I've had about these otherworldly entities. So they are visiting me. I'm just not remembering it in full.
Right. But you're assuming they're extraterrestrial and not just here with us in a different way.
Well, yeah. And, that's funny because I spoke to someone about that yesterday. I use that term because that's how people, that's how someone would understand what I'm saying. But the fact that you said that's right, I'm amazed because I just said yesterday, I was on a show called Occult 45. And I said to him, I said, I believe these beings have been coming here since the beginning of time, even since before us. So we're probably the extraterrestrials. And I do believe that, yes, they live out there in other galaxies in the multiverse and all that. But I do believe they live on a different dimension. A lot of them on this earth. We just can't see them. We're not open enough to see them. So it's funny that you say that because I do kind of agree with that sentiment that they might not be coming from out there. They might be here already, but I can't perceive them.
Yeah, a different wavelength of light. Who knows?
I believe it's dimensional. I've noticed that no spirit, my spirit guides, these shadow people, nobody, and I'm not the only one who's had this experience, will speak on, nobody from over there will speak on the 6th dimension.
Okay.
I challenge anyone to tell me what is on the 6th dimension or in the 6th dimension and where you got your information, please. Because I've had spirit guides, all different kinds of spirits, that shadow person family. I have a vision of asking the extraterrestrials. I've seen people channel extraterrestrials, and I always get the same response as something to the effect of the human mind wouldn't be able to comprehend it until they're in spirit.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. The thing about multi-dimensional stuff is that our brains are only set to perceive so many dimensions. John Keel, used the example of when he was talking about UFOs coming into our reality, how a lot of times they just appear and disappear. And he's like, well, if we lived in a 2-dimensional world, if someone put their 3-dimensional finger down, it would just suddenly appear in our 2-dimensional world. We wouldn't see where it came from because we wouldn't be able to conceive it.
That's so amazing. And especially that you mentioned him. Like I said, I'm very new to all this. Maybe the past, 9-10 months ago, when I first had that memory, that like kind of repressed memory, I've been literally obsessed. It's almost everything that I research, unless I absolutely have to, like for my book, research something else. So this is all new information to me because I've avoided it my entire life because I was terrified of it. And I believe that terror was put into me for some reason to hide so I didn't research and find out what the heck they were doing to me those many times that I'm sure I must have had, 300 convulsions from the time I was 2 weeks old until I was 6 years old,
Did doctors ever look at you for this stuff?
They said it was that my son has them, or he had one so far, and he's going to be 4 in July. But they said it was a febrile fever thing where your temperature will go from perfectly normal to like 103.5 in a matter of 20 seconds and your body can't handle it. So it is a very normal type of seizure I was having, but there were very not normal things going on while I was having them. I told my father that the roof opened up and there were people standing up there. I don't remember this. He does. He was like, yeah, you were a really creepy little kid. Like he tells all these stories because remember, he doesn't really believe in this. It's not that he thinks I'm a liar. He doesn't want to hear what I have to say, but he has all these memories of me saying all these, so-called strange things. But really, I was just telling him what was going on, but he doesn't accept it.
I strongly suspect that what we look at as the UFO abduction experience and such is very much tied into shamans. I think that it's very similar to the shamanistic experience. You get grays in altered states of consciousness from ayahuasca and stuff like that. And you get grays in cave paintings from shamans from 30,000 years ago.
I mentioned that in my most recent video called Meet the Greys. And that's when I started to have this thought or this opinion, which I'm sure is not new, but it's new to me, that perhaps, you're right, that they're Egyptian, hieroglyphs or hieroglyphics of grays and other reptilians even, and the spaceships in the sky. And most Native American cultures will speak on this stuff as though, they're telling you they had a grilled cheese for dinner.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
A very nonchalant and matter of fact. And it's like it's the way of the world. Like, I'm sure they've just retained it through their storytelling, and for their kids, instead of telling their kids that this is craziness and don't believe it, they did the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm. And they're still having very, very straightforward experiences. R.D. Sixkiller did a number of books on Native American experiences as well. When you look at some of these ancient accounts, like the ant people saved, is it the Navajo from the flood? And it's like, okay, so we know North America was severely flooded. Who were the ant people?
Right. Yeah. I'm writing this down because I'm definitely going to be researching, because it's, again, so new to me, and it's such an amazing topic. I have a memory from 2 weeks ago, and it came so quickly. I was giving someone a personal oracle reading, and all of a sudden I even said to them, "Whoa, what was that?" Because I got a flash of me screaming into this reptilian type extraterrestrial or alien's face, and saying, they were holding my head, and I was saying, I already deal with too much. Like, don't give me that. Don't give me that. And I don't know what that was about. I have no idea, but I remember pleading, and it was just that split second of memory. So I'm thinking of going into some hypnotic regressions eventually and writing about it.
Mm. Yeah, the problem with hypnosis is we were talking earlier about remote viewing. And when there's data to be verified, remote viewing seems to work very well if the person is a good remote viewer. But hypnosis is kind of the same thing. If someone genuinely doesn't remember stuff, hypnosis can just create false memories.
Is that true? Because
yes.
I've heard from both camps. Some people say that no way. And then I've heard other people say that because I can put myself into trance to communicate with spirit or to be kind of a conduit. I used to allow myself to be jumped to deliver the messages. I don't do that anymore. I used to allow myself to do that. They said because of that, I may be able to remember. I'm going to have to research, like I said, it's so new and it's so fascinating. But
Jenny Randalls over in the UK, she actually got ufologists in the UK to stop using hypnosis. And she did so by doing an experiment where there was some event in her life where she didn't remember everything that happened. She had some memory of it, but it was a normal event. It wasn't something paranormal. And there were records of what happened, but she didn't know what it was. So she was hypnotized. And the stuff she remembered normally was completely accurate. They hypnotized her to remember the stuff she didn't remember, and it was completely wrong.
Her mind filled in blanks.
Yes, her mind, because the information wasn't there. And if the information isn't there, it just fills it in. It also puts you in a very susceptible state. And apparently, false memories created by hypnosis can feel more real than actual memories.
That actually makes a lot of sense, Seriah, because now that you said that, that does make sense to me, because I know that if, your mind will fill in blanks if you don't remember something. That's why we get in the true crime community, or if you're a detective, I guess, you get, you ask 5 witnesses to give you the same description of a suspect. Yeah. And some of them will fill in the blanks a little bit different. That doesn't mean they're lying or that they didn't have the same experience as the other 4. It just means they perceived it differently, and what they didn't remember, their mind might fill in because they want to be helpful, or,
yes.
So that actually does make a lot of sense.
And memory is extremely fallible too. Even strong memories are often prone to fallacy.
Right. I'm going to, again, I just have to look into all of it. And I'm hoping that, I am on this spiritual journey. I do shadow work. I meditate. I'm hoping that they just come naturally back when they're ready to.
Right,
maybe there's a time like when I was giving that reading to someone, I don't know why it popped in then, but I was connecting with source. So maybe I was extremely open to remembering it. But that's the same thing with, we were going to talk about it anyway, but the sleep paralysis, like the scientists say, and I don't know exactly because I don't have it in front of me. I've done a lot of research on this, but there's something to the effect of the negative. I believe that even if you're not attacked during sleep paralysis, right? Because not everyone is, they just have a feeling of a negative energy or entity somewhere in the room with them. Mm-hmm. And scientists have found a way to explain this away. But what I feel it is I know from my guides and again from spirit that when we go to sleep, we do travel and talk to other entities about what we did during the day. So say, for instance, and I use this as an example because I believe people can understand it. You're in an abusive relationship and you have an opportunity one day to leave. You have a place to go and you'll be safe and you're going, but you don't leave because you love the abuser, right? Just keep that in mind. So when you go up in your sleep, these entities human beings are very emotional. We can be led by emotion. I have not experienced another energy or entity that is so led by emotion more than logic. So these other more logical entities, even the ones who understand emotion but don't feel it, they're like, hey, you had an opportunity today to walk away from this horrible person and better yourself. Why didn't you do it? And they don't understand that. I believe when you jump real quick when you're falling asleep, that's because your body's waking up before your spirit has returned. But I also think, and again, I'm still, neck deep in research on this, but I believe that feeling of the negative energy or entity is something that is trying to jump or wants to jump your body while you aren't there while you're sleeping. I do think there's a connection there. I really, really do. And I'm hoping in my next book to be able to make a lot more sense out of what I'm saying now. It's a little bit jumbled because I'm just excited to be talking about it, but I'm hoping to make it more, easily understandable in the book.
Yeah. And I mean, as someone who said, and my sleep paralysis actually doesn't quite work like most people's. So most people wake up and find themselves paralyzed. I will lay down and not even have a chance to fall asleep before the sleep paralysis experience kicks in. So I'm still fully awake and suddenly I'm like, I can't move. There's something in the room. All right. It's one of the few times though I actually feel fear because most stuff doesn't scare me. But for some reason in sleep paralysis, I always get that sense of fear. And I've had 2 experiences recently that seems to have mostly stopped the sleep paralysis. One, I had a dream about going through my parents' stuff after my mom had died, and wondering if maybe, I think in the dream I was thinking, it'd be really cool if my dad had stashed like $10,000 in cash somewhere and never told it. And so I wake up from this dream, which had a bunch of other stuff in it that was pretty cool, and I roll over to go to sleep, and instantly I feel this thing drop down on the bed behind me, and I feel the bed drop, depress. Like something heavy is there and it starts leaning over me. It feels insect-like. It's clicking. And I just said to it, hey, did my dad hide $10,000 in cash somewhere in the house? And everything stopped and it just went completely quiet for a moment. And then this really hoarse voice goes, no. And then I said, well, then what good are you? And I rolled over and shook it off.
Oh my God. Well, that makes sense because they feed off the fear.
Yeah.
And you were not giving it that. I had a glimmer man encounter with a clicking entity and kind of same thing. As soon as I turned my back on it, it was like everything, it happened outside. So the woods, everything had stopped. No birds, no dogs barking, no chipmunks, no nothing. Yeah. And as soon as I turned my back on it, it's like everything started up again. When the woods go quiet like that, there is an apex predator somewhere, right? Yes, that doesn't just happen.
Well, plus, the Oz effect is not just quiet. It's that almost sense of pressure on top of that quiet.
Yes. I just, I always say, and I've told that story a million times on YouTube, including a video on my channel. But I always say, I'm just glad I knew what the Glimmer Man was, because otherwise you guys would be telling my missing story right now, because this thing was trying to lure my child.
Well, so what exactly happened?
So I grew up, like I said, very Patterson, New Jersey, very urban, very inner city. But where my husband and I own our house now is about 30 miles from there. But I live literally in the woods, like no sidewalks, no public transportation. Right next to my house is wildlife protected, like no build land. So, I'm out here, right? And there's this brook that separates, my acres from this little grassy knoll and tiny little parking lot that leads into very, very deep woods. There's bear caves, fox dens, there's the reservoirs all the way back. I've explored it. So my son, who was just about to turn 2 years old, so he couldn't really speak, we decided to go next door to this little grassy knoll for a little picnic and to kick around the ball. And this is northern New Jersey. This is April, 2 years ago. And it's like 2:00 in the afternoon. So middle of the day, northern New Jersey, 10 feet from the road, right? The main road that I live on.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden I asked my son, like, are you hungry? And he gave me like the little yes nod. So I turned around to get some fruit. And then all of a sudden, all of the hair stood up on the back of my neck. And that is something that used to happen when spirit was around, or, but it's since stopped since I've learned to feel them out in other ways. So it was very weird, not only that it happened, but that it happened at all, right? Because it doesn't happen to me anymore. So I'm like, something is going on. I turn around and look at my son, and he's taking these he just learned how to walk a little while before this. So he's taking these tiny little stumbling steps towards like the deep woods there. I mean, right when you're off this grassy knoll, you are in the woods. There's trails. But he's looking up at the sky, and I hear a clicking noise, and I'm like, oh no, that's what it was. He would ask me, what does the dog say? And what is this? So when it came to bugs, what does an ant make? What does a praying mantis make? I don't know. So I told him that they go like that, right? Just to get him to stop asking me what noise bugs make. He is making the what do bugs make noise, right? So I'm thinking he sees some kind of bug flying around. I look up and shield my eyes, and in a tree, squat down with one hand holding onto the tree branch and one hand with a finger beckoning my son toward it, is one of the glimmer man entities, these shimmery entities that you can kind of only see in sunlight.
Right.
I call it the invisible man, the predator entity from that movie. That thing is real. Okay. I believe there's alien ones and government ones. I believe this one was alien.
Well, we definitely have the tech. So
yeah, I believe that there are government ones who hunt these ones or keep an eye on them at least. This thing ventured out, like I said, 10 feet from a main road in the middle of the day in northern New Jersey. I mean, they're getting pretty bold. So anyway, it's gesturing for my son. It's beckoning him, and he's walking very slowly toward it, making this clicking noise. And all of a sudden he's like, no, mama, no. But he's still staring, right? Dazed. I mean, completely mouth open, drooling, just walking. Like he was definitely entranced. So I'm pretending, all I thought to myself was, Gemma, pretend you don't see this thing. Just pretend like, yeah. And I'm like, what do you see up there, honey? Is it a birdie? And I'm like trying to pack our stuff up real quick without taking my eyes off this thing. And I noticed whenever it would click, right, because there was nothing else moving, the wind had even stopped blowing. I mean, it was nothing. But when this thing would make the clicking noise, because now this thing I noticed started clicking, there was clicking coming from right where this thing was. And this is the very condensed version of this story. So I noticed this thing's clicking and my son has stopped clicking. But every time it clicked, the trees where I guess its face would be, and I'm humanizing it for simplicity, the leaves would blow just in line with this thing's clicking. So it was giving off some kind of energy that was moving, the leaves around. And all of this, I said to my son, I'm like, hey, honey, let's go home. Now, my son never wanted to go home, but at this point he did. He turned around, he suddenly snapped out of it, and he literally had to blink like 10 times. He started crying. He ran toward his wagon, jumped in. As soon as the both of us turned our backs on this thing, the clicking stopped, the wind started blowing, the dogs in the neighborhood started barking. I mean, everything came to life again. I will never forget that experience. It was unlike any other supernatural, paranormal experience I had ever had. It was not friendly. I knew that. As soon as I got my son to kind of look away, I was still staring at this thing, and I saw its head kind of whip towards me. And I got this voice in my head, or this feeling of like, run now, get away now. Now, some people think that this thing was telling me, get away now, like it was trying to protect me. I can tell you 100% that was not it. It was my guides telling me, go. So I didn't get attacked. I can see that tree from where I sit right now in my bedroom. If it wasn't dark out, I mean, it's that close. I don't let my son play. He's almost 4 now, outside in the yard alone now. It was one of the most terrifying things that ever happened to me. And I met the devil. And I would say that this thing was more terrifying to me.
So when you say you met the devil, tell that story.
I could tell that story. So we had just moved into this house. It was 2017, and I was coming out of my addiction. I had just, started taking my medication and, kind of being a good girl.
Well, tell people a little about that so they know what was going on.
Okay. So, I had some issues in high school where, obviously seeing spirit, I wasn't that popular and I would get picked on. And I noticed that when I would think about all the horrible things I wanted to happen to the girls or even boys who were bullying me, within days they would have some kind of accident. Now, not some horrible accident where they would die, but they would, break a toe or be dropped during cheerleader practice and break a nose or, and I noticed that I started to notice a pattern. I would purposely think bad things about someone just to see if they would come and hurt. And I noticed that it was me doing it. So I shut everything off. I just stopped acknowledging. I started ignoring, and it was like a constant pressure, headache. I didn't want to see anything. I didn't want to hear anything. I didn't want to know anything. I wanted to be quote unquote normal, right? Once I realized I had the ability somehow to hurt people, I didn't want that. And I thought that being religious, that God had given me gifts, not curses. So why is it able to hurt people? I felt like I was bad and cursed, and I went through hell. So I ended up eventually, when I was 30 years old, I started using a major drug intravenously. And I did that until I was about, I guess, 35. Which is right around when we moved into this house. I was about 6 months out of, rehab, and I was doing well.
Good.
So my husband, thank you. My husband brought us this house. We kind of ran away together, me and him. Didn't tell anyone. We were just like, let's do it, So in the middle of the night, my house, my master bedroom is very big. And when you come out, there's a hallway. You go down some stairs, and to the left of the stairs, we have a 3-season room. And then there's a sliding door that leads out to the back deck. So it's about maybe 40 steps from my bed to the back deck. Okay. And that's important. So I'm sleeping, totally out. And I hear a voice calling, just like something out of the movie. Again, like Gemma. And it sounds like it's blowing on the wind. But I'm awake at this point. I've heard it kind of woke me up out of my sleep. Like whatever I was dreaming about, the voice was there, and then I was awake. So, in the movies, it's like, was I asleep? Was I awake? No, in real life, the difference, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, when you're asleep and when you're awake. I walk out downstairs, down the steps, and I'm like, there's nobody else in this house. My son I didn't even know I was pregnant for my son at that point. And my husband was sound asleep. He snores very loudly, so I know he was sleeping. So I'm like, what is going on here? So I walk out and I'm thinking, maybe it's a spirit that needs me. I had a friend that had just passed away. So I was thinking maybe it was him finally coming for a visit. So I go down the stairs, I go in the 3-season room, and I go out the back deck. Okay. Now, I am a paranoid person about locking windows, locking doors, every lock in the house all the time when I'm inside. So that needs to be said. So I unlock everything. I go out, and standing by the tree, about maybe 15, 20 feet from me where I'm standing, there's a big, I don't even know what kind of tree it is, guys, a big tree. And there's a man thing. I know it's an entity. I know it not to be human, standing there in full blown, again, just like the movies, top hat, 3-piece suit, holding one of those little cigarette type cane things. But the thing about the face, I couldn't grasp what it looked like. It would go from looking like the cartoonish devil to an extremely handsome, perfect model man to a beautiful woman to kind of this ghoulish face to this blurry face to having no face. And it would just switch like in a millisecond, less than a second. It was changing. It was constantly changing. So like telepathically, this thing starts sputtering out all of my deepest, darkest wants and wishes and telling me, I know that you want this. And, it's things that I won't even repeat. I was a little messed up in the head back then. And even things like that, I wanted to be rich at that time. I wanted things like that I had never told anybody, but that are obvious. But then also things I wanted another baby with my new husband, but we had decided not to have kids. And he was saying, I'll give you, a son. You have to bow to me. Now, I am very religious. It's not something I talk about often. I make it known. I am Christian. I'm saved. I'm born again. But I don't think like YouTube is the place for that. So if it comes up, I'll mention it. But, so don't be afraid to come over on my channel. I don't like preach the Bible, but I do believe in it. And I do a lot with my church. So I immediately, thought in my head, not even really to this thing, was like, I'll only bow to Jesus. And I turned my back on it. again, as soon as I turned my back on this thing, it was this animalistic, half coyote, half attacked woman, half evil, demonic scream that was so loud. I swear if my house wasn't made of stone, it would have shaken, it would have shook. I walked back upstairs. I somehow wasn't affected by this. So I had to have been in some kind of trance. I wasn't like shaking and scared. And I've seen spirits and I've seen, demonic entities, but nothing like this. But I wasn't like affected. It was so weird. I came upstairs. I went back to sleep. When I woke up the next day, I was like, wow, that was a really vivid, like lucid dream. That was crazy, right? So I stand up. I immediately noticed that my socks have leaves all over them. And there were leaves on my back deck. It was fall time. And my 3-season room door is unlocked and the door to the deck is completely wide open. It was real. It really happened. And I remember this thing saying, and I was saying, well, why would you give me all this? And he said, well, I want him in return and I will give you another one. I thought he was talking about my husband. I mean, I was madly in love, we are twin flames. So I'm like, whatever, dude. Like, it was just ridiculous. But I guess it was a serious thing because I found out a few weeks later that I was actually 18 weeks pregnant with a little boy. And my son now, my almost 4-year-old, is the one who remembers past lives, remembers being my mother, who is my soulmate, and who speaks to, he speaks to the dead all the time. I don't know how many imaginary friends this kid has of people who aren't imaginary. My stepfather passed away in February of, I won't even say it, the virus. And my son plays with him in his room all the time, and he knows people who he's never met at his young age. He knows a friend of mine that passed away in 2019 named Steve he plays with. And yeah, so my son was special in some way, or is that, I guess Satan or whoever, whatever that was, mimicking Satan, because I still don't know if that was actually him, like taking the time to come visit me for my son. What or whoever this was did not want my son to be born. They even said they'll give me another one. I just didn't know I was pregnant. I didn't know what he was talking about, what it was talking about.
The way I always interpret this stuff is that these things are always tests. Like I literally don't, one of the things that happened to me at the end of a dream, I suddenly wasn't in a dream anymore. And I was stopped from waking up. I wasn't in sleep paralysis. I was literally in this dreamscape, completely aware, knew I couldn't wake up. And they said to me, what's the worst thing that ever happened to you? And there's been plenty of bad things that have happened to me. But in the end, a lot of the bad things have turned, have had good consequences. Yes. So I sat there going, I really, I don't know, and I finally came up with something and they let me go. But like that experience to me, that almost sounds like it's testing you. It's not trying to hurt you. It's trying to test you from everything you've gone through to see if you've really changed.
And that could be why I didn't fear it. I mean, I don't care who you are or how many entities you've seen. When something that you are meant to believe, because I really do feel like I was meant to believe that this thing was the devil, right?
Right, absolutely.
For me to be as religious as I am and for it not to scare me, I often wonder what it means. Like, what does it mean? Was it a test? I had recently been born again and rebaptized. And I'd recently gotten back into the church, and then this happened. So then I wondered, was it my overactive mind? But then no, because I had the leaves on there's no way I would have went to bed with, first of all, I don't wear socks to bed. So I must have at some point put them on. Do you know what I mean? And to get leaves on them, I don't just go, I'm not a sleepwalker. So very strange. And it could have been that. It could have been my higher power testing me to see if I would go back to, I feel like anybody who's in addiction or an alcoholic or even someone who's very violent, I do believe those are lesser forms of demonic possession. That's just my own personal opinion. Because I do believe I was possessed by a demon. There's a story of, the man that was in the cemetery that was quote unquote possessed by 7 demons. He couldn't talk. He wore shabby clothes. He never left the graveyard and nobody would feed him or give him water. And when Jesus healed him, everyone was more afraid of him because now he was normal. And I feel like I am that person. In my addiction, I was that guy roaming the graveyard. But once I was healed, even people were even more worried about me. They were like, is she okay? What's she going to do next? Is she going to relapse? And I really do feel like that wandering man, wandering possessed man in the Bible sometimes.
Well, so when you say it's like demon possession, I mean, if you accept that something like ayahuasca and that other plants have a spirit, so can things like alcohol and other drugs have, but it's a negative spirit. So if you look at it like that, it literally can be a demon.
Yes, and I do. And you know what? However you perceive what I just said, or however you believe in it, I really do, in one form or another, feel like that, because even now, like opening up, coming out of the broom closet, letting people know, like, I'm a psychic, I'm a seer, I'm an oracle, I'm a listener. I could possibly, and I think a lot of us could possibly be, especially in this community, some form of extraterrestrial, throwing that word around loosely again, but,
right.
belonging to other.
Remember also that Satan in the Bible is basically a tempter.
Right, and a deceiver. Exactly. Yeah. And that's how I feel. I feel like I've come out of so much, but if I was not in that addiction, I never would have met my husband. He found me half passed out in a gutter in the pouring rain, sick, just laying there, wishing for death, and he helped me. And I never would have had my son, which I did want one more child, and I did honestly want it to be a son. So I don't even regret addiction. And outside of YouTube and outside of being psychic and all that, I do a lot of counseling and meetings that I run for other recovering addicts, and even addicts in active addiction. I try to help out. So, Yeah,
and that's fantastic. And that's the thing. I mean, as bad as that was, it put you somewhere better in the long run.
Yes, it did. Absolutely. And capable of being an actual parent. And I think that's what my son said to me when he meant, I think that's what he meant when he said to me, I had to wait for so long for you to get your stuff together to be my mommy. I think he might have been trying to be born during that period where I was actively addicted, and the powers that be were like, no, not yet,
Yeah. You talked in your book, you talk about an encounter you had with a woman hiking alone in the woods and got lost.
Yes, it was an encounter I had come across. I did not encounter the woman, but I think are you referring to the one where she could see the people that couldn't see her?
I believe so. It says, I quoted the whole thing, woman who was hiking alone in the woods and got lost. In trying to find her way back, she had injured her ankle.
Yes. Yes, that's the one. So there was this woman, and this is a little bit of a story that's been changed around a lot on the internet, but it came from a subscriber of mine who I do believe and trust in that this happened. So the woman was wandering, and she, I believe she was hiking actually, and she ended up getting off the trail, wandering off the trail by getting, as so many people do, suddenly confused, suddenly disoriented, suddenly nauseated, right? And I do believe that is the Fae. So she gets off this trail, and she ends up either tripping or slipping and somehow really injuring her ankle, where she can't walk anymore. She's kind of just pulling, we'll say it's her right leg, pulling her right leg along and putting all the weight on the left. Finally, she realizes it's getting dark. I better at least curl up under a tree and try to protect myself from the elements, keep one eye open while I'm sleeping, so animals don't get me or whatever. She wakes up so many times in the middle of the night. Obviously, she's in pain. She's scared. And she sees these entities watching her, just staring at her, not saying anything, but they're giving off this really malevolent energy. Like at any moment, they're going to strike. And I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it was like a day or two later. I mean, she was stuck there, no food. These other beings that she got a little lighter vibe off of, which I was very surprised, are these elves or gnome-like beings, definitely fey creatures who were bringing her little bits of, I guess you would call it fairy bread and little bits of water. And she somehow understood that these entities were protecting her from these shadow night watcher beings. But the kicker of this story is, once she saw, like, there was a point of, like, maybe on the third day, I believe it was, where she saw the people out looking for her, the search and rescue people, her family, everyone was out in droves looking for her. And she saw them right in front of her, and she went to go to them. And first of all, there was something like some kind of force field or something where she could not walk. It was like hitting a brick wall. even trying to crawl over to these people. And she's screaming and she's hollering. She hears them. She sees them. If she could have gotten through this force field, she could have thrown an acorn or something and hit them. They were that close. And she didn't understand, like, why couldn't they see or hear her? What in the world was going on? Because obviously they couldn't. They never stepped foot in this little bubble, though. But they walked all around it, looking on the ground, calling her name, looking in the tree above her. And eventually, nothing happened with these scary, malevolent feeling shadow beings. But these elf creatures did help her and kind of fend them off so she can get through this force field and go for help. And she did tell everybody this story that she saw them right there. She described what they were wearing. She picked out the people who were in that particular spot. You know, when you search for people, you map things out. Yeah. And they knew that, you know, Joe and Billy had been right in that exact spot the day before searching for her. Nobody understood it except to believe her that she was there, only not there. And I believe she crossed into some kind of fairy dimension where there were just other creatures. And it's very rare for the Fae to help you for no reason. They're usually the ones making you sick, discombobulated, and confused. But someone got their wires crossed because they helped her out and helped save her from these beings.
It reminds me of a story Patrick Harper sent me that he found where this woman was walking home from wherever it was, and she took a shortcut through a Fae fort. And when she got onto the fort, every time she tried to walk off one side of it, she would find herself walking the other way. And eventually searchers were out looking for her, and she's trying to yell to them. She can see them and stuff. And they couldn't hear her. They didn't see her. And she couldn't get off. And eventually, she said it was like the spell was broken and she was able to walk off the fort.
That's crazy. I've never heard that one, but I do know that sounds like when I did Missing in the Fae Theory, it started off as not really a joke because I've encountered fairies. I believe I have Fae blood. I believe a lot of us do. So I know a lot about them. And from what I've come to find is what happened to her, what you just said, sounds like some kind of punishment that the Fae will put you in a perpetual loop or something like that, where you can't go one way or the other as a form of punishment. So I'd be interested if she accidentally, because it's so easy to, they're very delicate, believe it or not, their sensibilities and their thought of what's right and what's wrong, that she could have accidentally offended them. And they put her on this loop to teach her a lesson. I believe a lot of the missing, now not all of them, I believe there are so many different reasons for, I call it the missing phenomenon, but you guys know what I'm talking about.
Right.
I believe there are so many elements and so many things we can blame, and each case is individually different. But I do believe because of the berry picking, because of the boulder fields, because of the missing shoes, I mean, I believe wholeheartedly that a lot of it is the Fae doing it. Being offended and putting people in perpetual loops where nobody else can see them until finally they're too exhausted and they pass away. And then the spell's broken and they're found, you know? That sounds like a Fae punishment to me.
Oh, could be. I mean, I don't know what it is. I mean, to me, the Fae are just another version of something we don't understand.
And they are, for sure. I say it in my book multiple times, you know, we're not sure exactly where the legend of the pixie comes from, and there are so many different ones. And, you know, I believe that they are 7th and 5th dimensional beings that just live a different way than us, with a lot more respect for nature. And I do believe they seduce humans sometimes, as I believe aliens or extraterrestrials abduct humans. But again, not many people think like that, Seriah. And that's a thought that I've come around to, like I said, very, very recently, where I feel like, you know, humans could be the quote unquote extraterrestrials, because these beings were here and visiting way before probably the dawn of time, or at least and we're the invaders here. We're the ones, you know.
And they may also work outside of time.
And that, I believe, is a very real possibility, you know, and we're nowhere near as advanced as them or caught up. I do not believe that time is linear. I don't believe in past lives. I believe in other lives, like reincarnation. Okay, that's the way that we can put it, but I'll say another incarnation. And the reason I say that is because we know already from, I think it was Einstein or I couldn't tell you because I'm not into the scientific part of it. I can't wrap my brain around it, but time is not linear. So all of your past lives, quote unquote, all of your future lives and all of your now lives are all happening right now, just on different planes of existence. There is another you that decided not to have me on the show tonight. There's another me that decided to do my oracle reading. There are so many vast numbers of each different choice that you make every single day. There's another you that made the opposite choice living on a different dimension. And that's what I truly believe, that 100%. And I believe that until we come back to this collective consciousness shift from 3 to 5D, and we get closer to God consciousness or source, if you're more comfortable with that saying, we're not going to see these things. And there are going to be people like me who are, so different that I can still perceive these other worlds every once in a while. I believe shadow people, and I'm going to talk about it in my next book, some of them are time travelers. Some of them are extraterrestrial observers. Some of them are ETs that we can only perceive because our minds can't comprehend what they are as shadow. There's so much we don't know. We're never going to, especially if we don't collectively shift.
And I think when you talk shadow people too, people associate things like shadow with darkness. So we automatically have the assumption that these things are negative. Regardless of what they do, it's just our unconscious bias.
Right. It's our humanity, and it's also our ego. I believe, and this is just my personal opinion, and I mean no offense by it, that it's very narcissistic and egotistical to assume that we're the only living things in the entire I believe in a multiverse. So across multiple universes and galaxies and all throughout the entire sky and everything out there, human beings we're it.
Right.
And we're the only planet. To me, that is, it's insane. And I think that's an insane person, to be honest with you. And again, no offense, I'm kind of being facetious, but if you really think about that, come on.
Well, to me, I suspect there's life everywhere. We just don't recognize it as life because it's not life like us.
Right, exactly. And we try to put human terms to these things. I even did it with the shadow people. Okay, male, female, pet. Dog, I actually put.
Well, our brain
but that's just
our brain can only process what it knows. If it comes across something novel, it has to try and fit it into a known paradigm.
Exactly, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. We don't know it all, and we are stunted is not the word I'm looking for, but I can't think of the right word. We're just not capable and of perceiving certain things, but all of us are different in our capabilities of perception. And there's one more thing that happened that I would love to tell you about if we have time. It's quick.
Go ahead.
So I have a 17-year-old son. His name is Damien, and Damien has been seeing spirit ever since he was little. I mean, I really think he actually has PTSD from it. He finally turns it off about 2 years ago, where he said, just like I did almost at that age, I can't take this anymore. He was getting visitations from, people in the family, and it was all verified. He would point to a picture and say, hey, that's Grandpa Ralph. And Grandpa Ralph died in 1972, and Damien was born in 2004. And this happened all the time. So anyway, Damien, I just said I was in addiction. Damien was raised by my mother and stepfather. So I was visiting them in their new house, and this was last June before my stepfather passed. And my stepfather is a total non-believer. I believe that he's seen things because it was once they moved into this particular house in an old shore town in southern Jersey, those old shore towns like Cape May and Seaside, Toms River, they all have rich history of, hauntings and battles even.
Right.
So, where there was a lot of deceased and residual energy. So Damien, my mother, I believe, is a Native American, has the ancestry and the blood of a healer. She's just never come to understand it or know it as that, because my mother has also seen this. I've only recently found out her entire life too, but she was too afraid of it to investigate. She was born in the 60s, and you didn't talk about those kinds of things, So anyway, I go to visit, and I bring my 3-year-old, and it was my first visit with my mom in a really long time. My addiction obviously has separated me from my family, and so she's meeting RJ for the first time, my 4-year-old, and it's just this great time, and we all go to sleep. Now, I decided I wanted to have a slumber party with my mom. So it's me, my mom, and RJ in my mom's really big bed. And the room to the left of us is my son, Damien, who was actually 16 at the time. And the room to the right of us, the guest room, my stepdad was nice enough to sit in there because my mom and I like to watch our horror shows and the Dead Files. And, so we waited for RJ to go to sleep. And RJ is my 4-year-old. And we're watching our show, we're laughing and stuff, and we start falling asleep. So everyone's sleeping, and it's about 3:30 in the morning. And I had told my mother when I first came in, she has this mirror in her house that came with the house. And I told her there's something wrong with this mirror. It gave me the creeps. It gave me the chills. She said it came from an old burned down church. Her landlord had put it in there, or the person who sold her the house had put it in there. So I first immediately, but I didn't see anything else. The first night we were there, I saw a shadow person standing over the bed, and my mom was like, oh yeah, that's just the shadow people. They wander around, like it was nothing. I could tell she was scared and she didn't want to talk about it. My mom gets very scared very easily, and Damien was just like, don't even ask. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm just letting you know a shadow dude was like sitting at the bottom of your bed. So it's the second night we're there. We're all laying in bed. We're sleeping. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, my son RJ jumps up, and he's between us in the middle, points to my mother's legs and screams really loud, Mommy, no, what is that? And then immediately falls back asleep. So I jump up, my mother is still sleeping through this, and RJ kind of fell into my arms. So I'm like cradling him. I was just about to lay him back down, and I laid him like, his head on my chest so he'd be comforted. I didn't know what happened. I knew he had seen something because he does that stuff all the time. It's creepy. He wakes up and he's like, I told you not to come in here. You're going to scare my mom. Go back into the other room. These things happen in the middle of the night all the time. So I know RJ had seen something at my mom's. So anyway, within, I'd say 3 minutes of my just starting to fall back asleep, my mother, who I've never seen cry and I've never seen scared, and I am 39 years old and 38 when this happened. Okay. I've never seen the woman shed a tear. She jumps up out of bed. First, she takes the blankets and throws the blankets and screams, no, get away from me, right? I think she's sleepwalking or something's going on. So all of this, I look at the blanket, and for not even a millisecond, it stays up and then falls. So something was under this blanket. Huh. She jumps up and she's screaming, no. She goes to run. Now the TV's still on, so there's some light in the room. She goes to run, and I see her fly backwards and hit her closet, hit her dresser. The next day, she was all bruised up. This happens twice. Finally, my son Damien, I hear him come out of his room saying, what the heck is going on here? And my stepdad bursts in the room and he turns on the light. Now, my stepdad is typical New Jersey, mobbed up Italian, Tony Soprano, looks just like Tony Soprano. So he comes in, and remember, he doesn't believe in anything. So she's going, there was an animal. It was an animal on the bed, and there was this demon thing. And she's screaming, and she sounds like she's screaming nonsense. And I'm going, Mom, stop. You're going to wake up RJ. Just calm down, because I'm not a panicker. I don't know that I've ever seen anything that made me scream at the top of my lungs or behave in the way my mother was behaving. Right. And I did at first think she was sleeping, but I realized after a couple of seconds, she was wide awake. Finally, when my stepdad flicks the lights on, my mom's able to run past him and out of the room and into the other room. So my son Damien goes to sit with my mom, and he doesn't want to leave her alone. She's crying. She's shaking so bad she can't even stand up on her own two legs. Now, like I said, I've never seen my mother be afraid of anything. She's your typical inner city ghetto rough and tumble Patterson chick, right? We're Jersey girls. We don't scare easily, but she is petrified, my mother. But I can't move because, understand, I'm still holding RJ, who slept through this. My mother screaming at the top of her lungs, being thrown into the door, the light being. I think, first of all, my son saw whatever this was, and I'm going to explain to you what my mom saw, and it knocked him out. It told him go back to sleep because he was warning us something was there. And I think it entranced him and put him back out. So my stepdad comes running in, and he's like, what was it? Was it a raccoon? Was it a spider? And he's looking under. And I'm like, yeah, it was something paranormal. She's saying it was a spirit. He's like, what were you watching? And he starts blaming me, right? Every time you come around. And so, because he doesn't know how to respond, because he genuinely doesn't believe. So anyway, we all finally get back to sleep. My mom turns the TV off. My son turns the light off, right? Or no, my son turns the TV and the light off, and he's like, good night. And he leaves me in there with my toddler in the pitch black in the same bed that my mom just freaked out in. And my mom sleeps in the next room with my stepdad, and we all go to sleep. I did fall asleep, but I did turn that TV back on, I'll tell you, because I was really freaked out. So right after the door closes, the lights go back off. I'm starting to go to sleep. My son RJ wakes up, puts his arm behind his head, cool as a cucumber, and says, can I have some milk? So obviously he had no clue what had happened. Right. So a longer story short, my mom the next day, I asked her what she had seen. She said that she had, she didn't hear RJ at all. she heard something walking next to the bed, but that she always hears that. So she ignored it. But she said she turned for a second to look, and there was this gigantic hooded shadow figure sitting on her legs. Now, while it looked like it was sitting on her legs, it wasn't. She couldn't feel it. She could just see that that's what it was doing. And there was this other lesser, like very small, that looked like a dog, just like I've been seeing my whole life, running back and forth across the bottom of the bed, which is, I think, what RJ saw. She said when she threw the blanket, she saw it stick there for a millisecond, and that's what freaked her out. But when she stood up and started running, she felt this force, this massive force throw her back. I looked it up. I looked up the history of the house. I actually went so far as to speak to previous owners and previous renters of the house. There is a Djinn in that house. When my stepfather passed in February, I went to stay with my mother up until about 2 weeks ago. It's May now. And the room I was in was connected to the closet or the attic. And I've got to tell you, that house, we would constantly run into the hallway because we heard crying. We all heard it coming from the other one's room. That house has a Djinn that is trapping other spirits there, that has a lesser minion on a leash that it keeps as a pet. And I've done multiple live streams from that house, and every single time, if you play it back, there are orbs, there are shadow people. A couple of times my mom was screaming upstairs because my son was telling her that there was a man at the door and telling her all these entities were there. So I'm going to be doing a book based solely on my mother's house and my experiences there.
Oh, okay.
It's scary, right? So I guess we had to be there, but it was like the scariest thing that ever happened to me. And I met the devil. Like, this scared me the most because my mom's reaction to it. Imagine like your mom, who's never scared of anything, who you've seen like beat up dudes, and then she's afraid, like she can't even stand. It was terrifying.
So wait, what was scarier, that or the Glimmer Man?
That.
Okay.
Especially when I found out it was a Djinn, because a Djinn, I mean, I can cross over spirits. I can try to get rid of demons. I can tell people bring in a chaos magician or bring in a white witch or whatever they need to do. If you ever watch The Dead Files, what Amy Allen does, I believe her last name's Allen. Now, I'm not as good as her. I'm no Amy Allen, but I do that from time to time for clients if they need me to. That's exactly what I do. But when dealing with a Djinn, man, and if I ever come on again and we have time, we'll discuss them. They are ancient. They are, oh my God, so evil. I'll be talking about them in a few chapters of the Shadow Person book coming out soon.
Well, they're also in the same category as the Fae, I think.
Yeah.
There's some of that same sort of folklorish, like this is something we can't really identify, so we've created this mythology for it.
Yes, and that's actually what I wanted to talk about. Like once I start talking about my experiences living in that house, I really want to go further into the Djinn. Now, my sister, who I don't have a relationship, I don't speak to, spent the night at my mom's one night when I was visiting home in the past couple months when I was staying with my mom. And she said she had this very vivid dream of being dragged out of the bed by a hooded, cloaked figure. Now, my mom hadn't even told her about this. And when we looked it up, it said that Djinn will do that. But I think you're totally right in that some entities or some things like the Fae, like Djinn, have these larger than life legends around them. And I'm wondering if I just could get a little bit to the bottom of it, if I can get this thing away from my family. And cross the spirits over that it has trapped there. I know there are trapped spirits there. There's the crying woman. And I also believe he's the reason my stepfather cannot get through. He was only able to make one visitation.
So how many books are you currently working on?
Currently, I'm working on one. I wrote the Missing the Fae Theory, right, which is available on Amazon. And that came off of some scripts for videos that I wrote for Missing Person the Mysteries. If Steve Stockton's narrating it, most likely I wrote it. I am head writer. And then Steve and I wrote a collaboration of 101 of the most terrifying real ghost stories. I don't even know the exact name. I don't even think we picked it yet. That should be out in a month or two. Okay. And then I'm currently writing Shadow Entities Beyond the Sleep Paralysis Demon, where I want to go in depth. And I'm contracted for a fourth book about my personal experiences, specifically in my mother's house.
Okay. Are these all going to be on Into the Fray?
Yes.
So you're combining the shadow people and the Djinn and the sleep paralysis all into one.
That is going into one book, but I have a feeling already that there's going to be multiple parts to that book.
Yeah. Well, it's not a small subject.
Right. If I'm limited, which I don't know, if I'm limited to like 50 or 60,000 words, there's going to be like 5 books. Even The Missing in the Fae, I want to do a second and third book. There's just so much.
Yeah.
And fairies absolutely captivate me, you know?
Yeah, you have a lot of good stories in here.
Thank you. I am the fairy girl on YouTube. I'm the resident fairy expert, and I will claim that title because I know my stuff.
Actually, one of the ones I wrote down that I wanted you to tell, since we still have a minute or two here, was the Anne Pitt story from the 1600s.
Oh, I can tell it, not verbatim, because I actually don't even have a copy of my own book. I gave them all away. But I can definitely tell you how that went.
Yeah.
Anne Pitt was a young woman who was working as a maid and housekeeper for a wealthy family. And she was out in the field one day taking a little break when she was visited by these, what she called these little men who would take her to the quote unquote castle in the sky. Now, this sounds a lot like UFOs, but I won't go there. I'll just tell the story, but it does sound like that's me. So I wonder if they're interconnected. And I did do a video on whether the Fae and extraterrestrials are interconnected. So anyway, Anne Pitt continuously has these experiences, and she opens up to a member of the family she's working for. And I do apologize, I can't remember the last name of this family, but she opens up to one of the female members of this family, and she told this person in secrecy she was basically being assaulted in a specific way by these beings. That's the best way I can put it, because I don't want you to have to edit anything out. And they were taking advantage of her, and they were doing this over and over and over again. So anyway, this other female that lived with this family that Anne told her story to had told other people, and it was eventually got around, it got reported. And it turns out that at the times that she said she was abducted, especially the first time, people were looking for her and couldn't find her. And she was just laying on the lawn when they took her. She was nowhere in sight, nowhere to be found. So the family thought she was just a weird girl who kind of took off and found a hiding spot when she didn't want to be bothered. You know, they didn't think much of it. So anyway, she gets arrested. She's a witch all of a sudden now, because you know how it was back then. It's like a woman knows math. She's a witch. Put her away. But she was kept locked up and away from people for so long, but she never lost any weight. She wasn't sickly. And she said it's because these creatures that were abducting her were still visiting her, and they were bringing her magic bread. Now, she never explained what this magic bread was, what it looked like, just that it was bread, and she would have a tiny little piece and it would fill her up, right? So eventually, somehow, and nobody knows, all of the charges are dropped against her and she's freed. And later on in life, she becomes a healer, a nurse and a healer, because these beings, while they were doing this to her, and I've noticed this reciprocity a lot with quote unquote extraterrestrial abductions, where she was being taken by either the Fae or extraterrestrials. I really don't know, because the way she described them was Fae, you know, wearing green outfits and pointed hats. But where she said they took her sounds extraterrestrial. So either way, there's always or almost always this reciprocity. If they take from you or traumatize you or abuse you in that way, they usually give you something. So Anne ended up a healer. She went and studied for it so she could be under the guise of a nurse, but I believe she was a touch healer, where she can just touch you and heal you, but she didn't want to be called a witch.
Right.
So later on, an investigator, a reporter, was sent to go and spend time with her. His name was Moses something or other. And he went to go speak with her, and she said that she would not tell him the story of what happened because she did not want stories and ballads being written about what had happened to her, even though that's what happened in the long run, right? Because I even told the story in my book, and it was 2021. But that's what I can remember about that story. But I do remember she was locked up for months and months, and they barely fed her, and she didn't lose a pound. Yeah. She was perfectly healthy. And that added even more credence to their theory that she was a witch.
Of course.
But for whatever reason, they dropped all charges randomly, suddenly, and out of nowhere and let her go. I'm wondering, were they compelled to do so? You know, there's so much we don't know about stories that are that old, and it is very frustrating.
All right. So your books are on Amazon. They're on the Into the Fray site as well, right?
Yes.
So there's that, and your YouTube is what?
My YouTube is Gemma Jade, Gemma Jade. And there are a couple Gemma Jades, but you'll see me because I'm the only brunette. And the other one does like lifestyle and stuff. I am true crime and paranormal. I also have another channel that I just started where I'm doing a lot of intuitive oracle, talking about the collective consciousness shift and herb magic, candle magic, the quote unquote witch stuff, which I don't like to call it that because I am a Christian, but it's called Moon Bear Oracle. And that's on YouTube. That's a smaller channel. What else? I'm on Spaced Out Radio on YouTube from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday nights for the After Hour show. I live stream Intuitive Oracle on Wednesday nights on my channel from 7 to 11 p.m. Eastern time. So that whole 4 hours, I will pull one Oracle card from any of my 60 decks and give you a weekly reading. If you all you have to do is come in. As soon as you come in, your name goes on the list. If you want to come in and see what it's about and you don't want one, you can do that too. You can say pass. Tuesday nights I stream, Saturday and Sunday nights I stream, both from 8 to 10 p.m. on my channel as well.
Okay. And as far as social media stuff?
I'm on Facebook, Gemma Jade, and I do have a merch store on Etsy called, I don't even know because I put it up today. It's called Gemma Jade Oracle, and that's on Etsy. So Gemma Jade Oracle, you'll find my Etsy shop, and I add to that pretty much every day now.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for spending time with me talking about this stuff.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I had a great time, and I hope to do this again. Thank you so much, Seriah.
I would like to take a moment here to thank all of my patrons. If it wasn't for you, this show would not exist as it does. And I want to give a special shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Leanne Cherry, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Stephen St. George, CJ, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Bobby Bear, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, land of the crazy incommunicable, Chris Ernst, Craig Cisternos, Craig Parmenter, Crystal Ann Compton, Diane B., Duffy Dowder, Edu Camahort, MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, Joanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, MJ Armstrong, Jim and Sophie, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jefferies, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, 36 Dingo, Thunderboy, Timothy Castaneda, Tyler Glimstead, Vincent Trewill, Walker, Will Gebhard, William Powell, Ren Collier, Stephen D., and Amber Hall. Thank you all so very much. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.